Welcome in everyone and good afternoon. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson and we're really going to be laser focused on recruiting, especially some new intel I have on some portal prospects in addition to some player retention for the Razorbacks current roster. The Hogs are obviously still having their season and playing one of the final 16 teams, Sweet 16. And then we're going to talk, more about some other things in terms of recruiting because we're going to look at this roster in terms of does it expand? I believe it will expand. And so everything else, every point of reference after that is if it expands beyond the top nine to maybe 10 or 11, which I'm told the NIL resources are in place to do that, then it puts a different light on Arkansas's recruiting this cycle compared to last cycle. And plus, the last cycle, we know it was a little bit different. It wasn't a true full recruiting cycle. Calipari brought players with him from Kentucky. He brought recruits with him from Kentucky. You had one player that was retained off the previous season's Arkansas roster. So you had a lot of things going on. And then we'll wrap up today with a quick preview. I'm going to preview Arkansas Texas Tech. That's tomorrow night. 9:09 is the projected tip time around that time on TBS. The 10 seed Razorbacks versus the 3 seed and 9th ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders. And the Sweet 16 is the the West Regional semifinals, Florida and Maryland in the other semi. So, that's the 1 and 4. So the seeds held true on that side of the bracket. Arkansas is the lowest remaining seed in the 16 team field that remains. And you had the transfer portal open up on Monday, just a couple of days ago. So Arkansas and some of these other teams, obviously 15 other teams, are in a little bit different place where they're focused on their season right now. They really can't bring in visitors and they can't put as much time into recruiting out of the portal as everybody else. And so that's part of the reality of where we're at now. But Arkansas has already contacted several players. And I'm going to focus on intel on a couple. And there was another development today related to Arkansas that's not based on my intel. So but I'm going to start with an in-state kid from Ashdown, Lamar Wilkerson. His name has been floated about for a while in terms of maybe there'd be an interest with Arkansas. Maybe Arkansas would have an interest with him. This is information I got in the last 36 hours. I wanted to come on yesterday, but I wasn't able to do that. I've been under the weather and battling some stuff, so I was not able to come on yesterday. But we're getting it done today. And so Lamar Wilkerson is a kid I covered 2019 at Ashdown, 3A state champion. I was there for his title game. I covered several of his games. I was at the AAO Combine in Fayetteville when he participated in that around that time, so it's been a minute since he came out of high school. And he was a player that when college coaches were contacting me about him at that time, I'm like, he's a D1 guy for sure. Academics were things that was floating around, rumors about his academics. I didn't go there, but I was asked a lot about him. I actually tried to help him a little bit, get his information out to some different colleges at that time. But he ended up going the JUCO route initially, and he's been at Sam Houston State. So he's got another year of eligibility, but a 6'5" guard out of Ashdown, really good kid. And what I remember about him is how hard-nosed and competitive he was, especially the bigger the stage. He was the kind of player that really showed up and showed out in the right way. He plays to win, but he's very competitive, determined, and a hard-nosed kid. But the Conference USA Player of the Year, and we're going to go through his stats and everything, but I've got some intel on this. So you've heard this name. We've been talking about it over at hogville.net, and you're probably hearing some things that look good for Arkansas. I'm told Arkansas is the leader in the clubhouse, and that this back and forth, this interest actually goes back to mid-season this season. So the people I'm talking with are saying this is more than a flirtation. Arkansas is the leader for this young man who's in the transfer portal, technically went on Monday. And I've been having some back and forth exchange with him via text. But I have source information leading to that telling me that Arkansas is the perceived leader based on a much longer framework of contact through whether it's third-party channels, whatever. Technically, until they hit the portal, the school can't have direct contact. So whatever's been out there, that mutual interest and this thing has been brewing since mid-season of this past year. So we'll see where it goes. I don't have information to say that he is a solid or quiet or non-public commit right now. I've had information on players like that before, but we know with Calipari, there's a process. Arkansas, there were photos of Arkansas practice emerging early Tuesday or sometime on Tuesday. Arkansas wasn't home very long. There wasn't time when the portal opened on Monday to have him in for a visit. Kentucky's in the mix. Kentucky's in the mix for this player, for Lamar Wilkerson. But Calipari has a process. We know in his previous recruiting cycle, we mentioned it was different, but what was the same was he always had players on campus. And that would happen before there was anything that would go public in terms of, well, he's committed. But we were leaking stuff to you on many of these podcasts or episodes, whatever you want to call them, on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, that players were silently committed, that there were procedural stuff going on the back end that informed me, in addition to source information, that these guys were already in the fold for Arkansas, and it was a matter of time before it went public. And part of that process, chronologically, was getting them on campus. And so the earliest possible opportunity to do that now, whether you win this weekend once, twice, and continue to play, would be the following week, while you're still preparing for a Final Four. If you won both games this week, or your season's over, but either way, next week's the soonest opportunity really to have a visitor in. If you lost on Thursday, I suppose you could work something out for get back in time to do it over this upcoming weekend. So those are things to keep an eye on. But this is a player that's also entered his name in the NBA draft pool. So, there's some similarities here when you look at the size, 6'5", guard, when you look at the production, playing in the same conference or a similar conference, not the same as the American Athletic. It's not quite that level, but Conference USA is a good mid-major conference. He was the player of the year in that league. But there are some similarities in terms of Nelly Davis in need, a veteran, volume-producing lead guard. But there's some definite differences between these players. First, I would put Nelly as a guy that would be ahead of this player comparatively defensively. But offensively, I'd actually put maybe Wilkerson a little ahead of where Nelly was, same stage and playing mid-major ball before moving up. And we can only assume that Lamar Wilkerson's looking to go the high major level, especially given what I'm hearing about Arkansas being the leader in the clubhouse right now. So you can look at that how you want. Some people say, well, that makes him a lock. I'm not saying that I have enough information to say he's a silent commit, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was. Remember, even if his name's in the NBA draft pool, that could be for feedback. It could be a situation where that's the only thing that would pull him away from Arkansas. And then you get into NIL, and the only thing I could see tripping this up at this point, if what I'm being told is true, is if the NIL, other teams, we've seen Kentucky do this when Brandon Garrison was on Arkansas's campus visiting. They upped the ante, and he ended up committing at the end of his Arkansas visit to Kentucky, sight unseen, hadn't even visited. So who's to rule out something like that happening, where some team jumps out with NIL that Arkansas caps its valuation? We know there's a range for every player, and there are limits to what they'll do. But aside from something like that, based on what I'm hearing, this looks really good for Arkansas. I believe right now that Arkansas is in the lead for this young man, and this is one of those things that could maybe happen quickly. It could be a thing where he sees if he's invited to a draft combine or what other interest he gets for the pro level and how long he wants to do that. But remember, at one point, Arkansas, with its deal with Nelly Davis made an announcement. Even though he hadn't been invited to the combine, he was invited to the G League Elite Combine and turned that down. He ended up opting not to do that and firmed up his commitment to Arkansas, and that went public. So you have these dynamics, and it was a while later when he officially withdrew his name. So these are things that you have to keep an eye on. But I'm going to make some other player comparisons with him. I think in terms of need, a veteran two guard that can play the wing, can move over, play the three if you need to, and being a guy that's had a lot of experience. The difference with him, again, with he and Nelly in terms of that experience is Nelly a little higher level. I think the American Athletics is a little notch above the Conference USA, but also had Final Four experience and was part of two NCAA tournament teams. Lamar Wilkerson doesn't bring that. But that's when we're going to move over and talk retention here in a little bit. And then we're going to shift back to more portal players. But the reporting from me right now is it looks good for Arkansas, really good. And if what I'm hearing is true, leader in the clubhouse, what does that mean? I mean, it sounds like this has been, there's been a serious interest both ways going back to the midseason, not just recently. I know for a fact Arkansas, I've had multiple sources tell me they've already been in contact with him directly since he's been in the portal. That's another part of that. So this is very interesting, but look at him statistically, 20.5 points per game this past season, 4 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1.1 steals per game, an 82.2% free throw shooter. But this is what catches my eye, and this is the difference between he and Nelly and where he might be more comparable. And I'm going to compare and contrast to guys like Chaz Lanier and Kobe Brea. Chaz Lanier at Tennessee this past year, Kobe Brea. Both coming from the mid-major level in the last portal recruiting cycle and moving on to the SEC. But he's a little bit more comparable when you look at him as a volume three-point shooter. 7.7 three-point field goal attempts per game and a 44.5% shooter from three. That is elite on elite volume. And it's different. Nelly Davis was a really good three-point shooter at Florida Atlantic, 41%. Percentage a little lower, competition maybe a little better. Marginal there. But when you look at Nelly, that was on 4.1 attempts or 3 attempts per game. So you've almost doubled that with Bryce Hopkins. And then the eye test. I've watched this young man play. I went back and looked at his highlights, some raw game footage and highlights combined. And he is not a toe the line three-point shooter. He will shoot from deep, from range. And it's more comparable to what he does, not only in terms of volume and attempts per game to Kobe Brea and Chaz Lanier, but the range and the craft. He's effective as catch and shoot. He's got a one dribble sidestep, a one dribble step back. Off catch and shoot, I've watched him as guys close out on him, shoot over defenders from 23 to 25 feet with defenders closing, a guy right in front of him. He shoots over him. So it's a much different feel than a guy like Nelly Davis. This isn't a knock on Nelly. I think Nelly brought more statistically across the board and probably a better defender. This is so there are similarities in terms of fit and need and veteran qualities, not being a high school level guy, but maybe a different element as far as helping Arkansas as a three-point shooting team. If you remember when we looked at what Arkansas's roster build was last year, we talked about, man, there's no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of length, athleticism, guys out of the portal with deep NCAA tournament experience and success, all that stuff. But what did we identify? A very thin front line in terms of numbers, question marks about physicality for certain guys on that thin front line, and three-point shooting. So when we came on and said, well, look, Arkansas is looking to maybe expand from 9 to 11, that helps deal with some of that roster injury attrition we've seen all year. But also, I think a guy like Lamar Wilkerson, immediately, if this guy's in the fold like I think he is, then he's a different answer than what you did in this last portal season in terms of your three-point shooting. Because go and watch his footage. If you haven't done it already, this guy gets it in so many ways from three-point land, and the volume's there, the efficiency's there. And let's just go through Chaz Lanier. I made the comparisons. Chaz Lanier at North Florida averaged nearly 20 points per game, just under it 2 years ago, on 7.5 three-point attempts per game. Remember, Wilkerson 7.7. And he was a 44% three-point shooter at North Florida that season. So very similar numbers. Wilkerson at 44.5. This past season at Tennessee, his attempts have actually increased a little bit to 8.1 per game from three, but his efficiency down a little bit, 41%. Well, he's been spectacular. One of the top players in the SEC. We know that, Chaz Lanier. And you expect, playing at the high major level, excuse me, that those numbers are going to come down a little bit. And he averaged over 18 points per game. So it wasn't a significant shift, but the idea is you see the kind of volume. And if you've watched Chaz Lanier, you know he can pull from, he's not towing the three line every time he does it, and there's real craft in how he gets it. And so I make the comparisons to Nelly in some ways, but this guy's more comparable to more of your higher volume three-point shooters and overall, he's a high volume scorer because he's over 20 points per game. Lamar Wilkerson is a Conference USA Player of the Year. The Kobe Bryant comparison is almost also a contrast. Coming out of Dayton, playing about 25, whatever his minutes were, just a little bit lower volume. 6.13 field goal, 3 point field goals per attempts per game, but at almost 50%, 49.8, averaging about 11 to 12 points per game. Well, he comes to Kentucky playing about 25, 26 minutes a game, going from 6.13 point field goal attempts per game down to 6. So only a 0.1 difference, basically the same. But his percentage expected, again, playing at this level, went from 49.8% from 3 to 43.8. Still really good, but a guy, again, that's averaging between 11 and 12 points per game. So the comparison is you start seeing elite numbers. This is a higher volume guy even than Nelly was, but the usage is not the same. And he's more of limited to 3-point shooting than maybe some other things like a Chaz Lanier can do, and what I think Lamar Wilkerson will be able to do inside the arc. Go watch Lamar Wilkerson. It's not just the 3-point shooting. He can do a mid post. He's a big guard, turn and score. He can, he's going to get out, get some in transition, and slash a little bit. But he's got a nice game aside from that heavy volume and elite efficiency shooting from 3. But it's a really big deal. So this would be, to me, a no-brainer for Arkansas to add him. I think you could be on the court with him and Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas. Your retention, and we're going to talk about that, you're obviously drilling down on guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. But if you look at Arkansas's backcourt this season with all hands on deck, that was the deeper part of it, 1 through 3. And we talked about a thin front line in terms of numbers. But you could stack a guy like this in that lineup with those incoming freshmen who, believe me, are targeted to have major roles coming in. Top 10 rated 5-star McDonald's All-American guys in Acuff and Thomas. And there's not a problem with Wilkerson in here because he's interchangeable as a 2-3, could play alongside Malik Thomas. You have lineup versatility with guys like Carter Knox, who will be improved, continues to improve. Same with Billy Richmond. But now you have a spoil of riches, and you've added what none of those other guys possess, in my opinion, is a proven, obviously older college level player at the Division I level, knocking down a huge volume of 3-point shots at a very elite clip. So we said a lot there to talk about that. Again, he's entered into the NBA draft. I made some of the player comparisons. I contrasted him a little bit with Nelly Davis when you look at it just from the 3-point shooting aspect of it. But Lamar Wilkerson, if in fact this is going where it looks like it is right now, this would be a big addition for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Nearly 18 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. The intel nuggets there. I'm being told Arkansas is the leader in the clubhouse. Arkansas has definitely been in contact with him since he's been in the portal, direct contact. But the back and forth, I'm told, has been going back since mid-season. And, Kentucky's involved here. But we just went through some of the stuff. All right, I have another piece of intel for you. And this is a name that's been we knew was coming into the portal. One of the top portal prospects out there. I've tweeted about him. I may have talked about him on the last one I did. But I spoke to him yesterday. I spoke to him earlier yesterday. Again, I planned on coming in on the afternoon about the same time I did today and was derailed by that and was laying down for a while. So we're here today. But Bryce Hopkins out of Providence. 6'7" big guard wing. I spoke at length with him yesterday morning or early afternoon about what's going on. He was at Arkansas St. John's game in the round of 32 on Saturday in Providence. Well, he played at Providence this year. He said, I'm a big basketball fan. We're out of the tournament. And he goes, plus, he said he has high level of interest in Arkansas as he's entered the portal now. He's officially in. And he told me, as of yesterday, he has not heard from Arkansas staff. So that's a nugget of intel. We've been talking about his name, but a couple of things here. 6'7" guard, wing, and he had an injury this past year. He started with Cal as a freshman in the 21-22 season. That was not a good, experience from him in terms of, I shouldn't say not a good experience. It wasn't what he has become at Providence. It wasn't a productive volume guy. He didn't get a whole lot of opportunities there. And so the question marks were coming into the portal with Arkansas show interest. Well, so far he hadn't heard from Arkansas staff. That may mean something or may not. Arkansas is busy right now. Again, on Tuesday, they were already in San Francisco getting ready for this Sweet 16 matchup with Texas Tech. but he hadn't heard from the staff. But what he told me is, he goes, I want to hear from the staff. I would have interest in playing with him again. That entire staff, I have positive feelings about from my time at Kentucky. This is, just a really solid young man. We talked for a little while about his injury. He had a knee injury, an ACL injury. He tried to make a return this past season. I think, was it December or January? And then had a knee contusion. So he only played 3 games. They shut it down after that. But in 3 games this past season, 17 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 3 assists, and he shot 40% from 3. So it's a very small sample size, but this has been a productive, good player. He's considered one of the top portal prospects out there. He told me, I asked him, because it's been reported he's got a visit lined up with St. John's this weekend. And he actually told me, I haven't seen anything today. I didn't notice it if it's out there somewhere, but he was actually working to have that rescheduled. So he's maybe not going to visit St. John's this weekend. Georgetown's been named with him. He didn't want to go into some of the other teams that he's talking to, but Arkansas is one of the schools he'd like to hear from. So take that for what it's worth. I've spoken with Bryce Hopkins, and that's where things stand with him. But it was a good conversation, and this is a good player. And if Arkansas doesn't contact him, it may have something to do with his positional similarities to guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. And to me, those are priorities. They've been in your system. They're turning into really good players. And maybe you don't need or don't think you want another player that can fill in that 3 spot. Because remember, Kareem Rital, 6'9", some people think that maybe he's really 6'8", maybe only 6'7", kind of a versatile 3-4 guy that can help you at the 3 as well. The 20-year-old Lebanese forward that just recently committed to Arkansas. We've talked about him. He can stretch the floor a little bit. So how crowded do you want to get? Bryce Hopkins is a small forward, if you want to call him that, a big guard, wing, whatever, at 6'7". Just looking at him, he's a big rebounder too. It's not that it wouldn't be a good fit, but where are your priorities? And again, I talked to him on Tuesday. The portal opened up on Monday. Again, he attended the Arkansas St. John's game on Saturday, and then it was recently reported that he'd be taking that visit. He's been on a Zoom call with St. John's and would visit there this weekend, but he told me he's actually working, maybe trying to reschedule that. So that's what he said. All right, so let's move on here. News that came out today from 247 Sports. I think it's Sam Kaiser put this out, a list of contacts out for Nick Pringle, who I was going to talk about anyway yesterday and today, because I was going to talk about that big SEC big man angle like we saw with Jonas Adu. Not quite the same, not the all-league performer that Adu was, but a veteran guy. We know he started at Alabama, then it was South Carolina. But Nick Pringle, his contact list came out today, and Arkansas is one of the schools that he's reporting Nick Pringle to this reporter, this recruiting analyst that's been in touch with him already. Doesn't surprise me one bit. We saw what Pringle did to Arkansas in the road game. He's listed at 6'10". Is he 6'9", 6'10"? I don't know, but he's 220 pounds, 9.5 points this season, 6.3 rebounds per game, and 57.2% from the field. Now, he's probably, I wouldn't put him in the category of Jonas Adu in terms of the mid-range, but the percentage is high, and he gets most of that around the basket and in the paint. But he's only a 65.5% free throw shooter. Again, Jonas Adu hasn't been a world beater. He's made timely free throws in some big games, but percentage-wise, not elite or anything like that. And we know a lot of line guys are like that. But this guy's more physical. I think he's more physical than any frontline guy Arkansas has now. He is a ripped up 6'9", 6'10" at 220. So Nick Pringle, I don't know where that goes, but when we jump here now, so that's not my intel, but it is a development today. I've got more stuff to talk about. I'm going to come back to some of the portal names I want to talk about today. But I want to now shift into, as we're nearly 25 minutes in, to this current roster and what retention might look like, because we know the names. We go 4 deep when we look at the recruited class. Acuff, Malik Thomas, we mentioned those names, 2 top 10 rated 5-stars, a point guard, lead guard, and a 2 that can also be a 3. We've talked before so much about Isaiah Seeley, a 1-3 kind of guy, combo guard and wing. We don't know what his role or presence will be year 1, because I project those 2 top 5 rated 5-stars out of the gates to be projected as significant contributors and roles on day one. I'm not sure about Sealy, and I'm not sure if Artal is a guy that's projected for the back end of it. Call it an 11 rotation. Let's say it's 11. So we've got those 4 recruited players out of the high school 3 and 1 coming overseas. When Calipari talks about high school players or where he's at with that part of his recruiting and not the transfer part, he's really not talking about Artal, because even though Artal technically is not out of the portal, he's a more veteran guy. He's played professionally. He's an older guy, and it's just not the same thing. So when you hear Calipari talking about he's got 3, he's talking about, if he's not just talking about freshmen, he's talking about high school players and maybe going to add 1 more. Well, he's talking about Nate Ament. We're going to give a little bit of an update on that because I'll call it intel. It's nothing earth-shattering that's going to give away anything, but it's just updated information as we come down with only 6 days to go to his target date for announcement, the 5-star in the class of 2025. And when we talk retention, we just went through the 3 high school players in the early signing period and Kareem Artal, the international player. So that's 4. And we know there are 5 names when we talk retention. So 4 plus 5 is 9. If you go 11 deep, in a sense, if you could retain all 5 of the guys we're about to name on your current team, then you're only going to get 2 guys out of the portal if you cap yourself at 11 NIL guys. It may be one of those things. And so I doubt that Artal, I've seen people ask, well, is he one of those walk-on type? No. He's got one of the big name agents out there, Daniel Poneman, who's representing a lot of these transfers. And those guys have been involved in this. I don't know how much NIL he's getting, and I don't know where he's tiered as far as a priority. But my guess is my thought is he's projected for Arkansas. So let's call it a top 11 rotation for now. All right. So your 5 retention guys then are obviously on your front line: Trevor Brazile, Big Z, Zvonimir Visic. We mentioned Billy Richmond III and Carter Knox, and of course DJ Wagner. We've heard different things. Maybe DJ Wagner, I think Trilly Donovan, who that is, has put some stuff out at one point not that long ago that maybe DJ was going to get in the transfer portal. Well, we'll see about that. DJ's one of the highest paid NIL players on Arkansas's roster. I won't go into the figure. He's also got one of 6 players coming out of the high school ranks as a top 10 rated 5-star that got a deal with Nike. So he's got some good stuff in place already. And I don't know that Arkansas wouldn't look to escalate what they would do with him. Remember, if we're talking about Lamar Wilkerson potentially being in the fold, this guy's not a lead guard type of guy. DJ Wagner is. DJ Wagner just went through a situation where he's playing alongside a highly regarded 5-star McDonald's All-American lead guard who really was the primary lead guard until he was hurt and out. And now that he's come back, he's playing more off the ball in a more reduced role and really helping Arkansas. That's obviously Boogie Flan. But maybe the idea is, does DJ Wagner want to go through that situation again with a guy like Darius Acuff? Well, it worked out this year, but who knows what's on DJ Wagner's mind. But aside from that, how many can you really retain out of those 5? Trevor Brazile, here's more intel for you. I'm going to throw this out here now. Take it for what it's worth. I will disclaimer the hell out of this on the front end. I don't necessarily know that it means anything moving forward. I don't know what other factors are going to weigh into his decision. We hear stuff like this from players and their camps, especially when the season's at the end and you're having success, or it just ended and emotions are high. But from his camp, not representation, let's just say family, more than one, have indicated to people I talk to that the idea is he wants to return. Trevor Brazile. All right, look at how he's playing now. To me, if I'm Calipari, I'm doing everything I can. I mean, the guy, to me, is earning a sweet NIL pot based on the way he's playing now. And I'm not going to speak for Calipari other than to say if I was him, I don't know what he's going to do, but if I was him, I'd be trying to keep Trevor Brazile. Now, Brazile may have an opportunity to go ahead and pursue a pro career. I don't know if he'd be invited back to the combine. I don't know if it's a matter of testing the waters. I don't know if you get back in the portal to see if you can raise your NIL, but I've heard from that more than one in his camp have said that the idea is he'd like to be back at Arkansas. Well, things are working out pretty well if he wants to come back to college to just stay put. at Arkansas. Look at the success they're having now. Look at the success he's having under Calipari. They've got things clicking right now. And this is the best Brazil's played. I go back to how good he was prior to the injury and going through Maui and all that. He's actually more consistent now than he was in the 8 games and got hurt early in the 9th game that season in early December. I think he's more consistent now and putting up double doubles, and the way he's rebounding with a vengeance. He gets out of his area. He's still blocking some shots. He knocks down threes. He's the kind of guy that's maybe helping his pro cause. And so the sentiments I'm hearing now might feel a little bit anecdotal. Yeah, there may be some passion towards coming back, but at the end of the day, if there's an opportunity for him and a chance to get on a faster track to an NBA career, I think he's got to look at that and do that. And I'm not so sure he shouldn't test the waters. A matter of fact, I'm not so sure that guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond shouldn't put their name in and get feedback. What's the worry there? I don't know that they will. And I don't know where NIL is going to play for some of these guys to turn their attention away from something like that. Yeah, DJ may not be leaving Cal. I mean, I lean toward that. I really do. I don't see why. He's having hella success. It's been a journey for all these players dealing with injuries and roles changing. But we're solid. We're solid now, more than we've ever been, if you want to say it that way. When we said early in the year, before the season started, I did a power rankings for the SEC back in September. Back in September, before all the non-conference success, all that. And I had in my top 5 Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, Florida 4th, and Tennessee 5th. The only team that didn't do that in the regular season was Arkansas. But now that we're looking at the postseason, Arkansas looked like the preseason top 16 it was. It was getting projections for top 3 or 4 in the SEC. And in September, I wasn't far off the way it looks now. Excuse me, I'm wheezing a little bit. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's driving me crazy. So, you know, to me, a DJ Wagner is part of the overall roster when we start talking about, the strength of these individual pieces was always there. The talent, the size, maybe not 3-point shooting skill. We identified that as an issue. Maybe Arkansas is too in preseason. Maybe Arkansas is too with guys like Lamar Wilkerson maybe becoming a focal point. A little bit, it's a step up in terms of how they recruited that same position out of the portal last year in terms of 3-point shooting volume and elite shooting. Maybe a guy like DJ Wagner can continue to improve that and get what he needs staying at Arkansas. But if you retained all 5 guys, I don't know about Big Z. I don't know what they're going to do there. But let's say Arkansas, let's just say, and I'm not going to go through who they, let's say they only keep 3 and we know they've got 4 guys signed now. Or as far as Artal, I don't have it confirmed that he's done his paperwork in terms of a financial aid agreement, which is what he would sign. But, his agent told me that the goal for him was he's working on getting his student visa now and that he'll be on campus for summer 1, and so that means on campus at sometime late May. So that's the goal for him. So those 4, plus let's say you only kept 3, well, that means you might get as many as 4 guys out of the portal if you go up to an 11 deep roster. If I'm Arkansas, there's reasons for all 5 of these players that you're trying to retain to try to retain all 5, unless there's something behind the scenes we don't know and they've got some other idea of how to fill a spot. And those things eventually might reveal themselves to us. But I see a reason to try to keep everybody. And then you start looking around. We mentioned Nick Pringle. The news came out today that Arkansas has been in contact with him. That doesn't surprise me at all. What about other frontline guys? So let's go back to portal players now and start talking about it. Whether you need 2 out of the portal or something like 4, maybe somewhere in that range, I'm kind of saying is where I think this could land. I think it'll be somewhere between 2 and 4, because I do believe this roster will be expanded to at least 11 in terms of real NIL guys that you're spreading around NIL and guys you might use. Actually have a plan for to be in there. It doesn't change the fact that you're probably really going hard most of the time with the top 8 or 9. But you still, to me, need guys on the back end, because we saw it this year that can step in and help you. And we're seeing now Arkansas's top 9 has changed in terms of, you're 2, we'll talk more about Adu Thero and the idea that he's coming back in this next game, but you're at a place now where guys like Boogie Flynn and Adu Thero are more of role player guys. And these were your two leading scorers through the first 18 games of the season, both over 15 points per game, both playing at all SEC level. Right now, through two NCAA tournament games, your two leading scorers are like you thought it was when the season started. It's Nelly Davis at 15.5 points per game and Jonas Adu at 14.5 points per game. Those are your two leading scorers in the NCAA tournament. Doing a lot of other things other than scoring, by the way. So the roster was put together so well through 9 that you've been able to mix and match who has these feature roles. I mean, your last game in the NCAA tournament, your two freshman wings each led, they 1 and 2 in your leading scores. And arguably your co-players of the game or something like that. So this idea that you want to keep 5 of these guys, to me, says everything about what I think Arkansas should do. But what's the reality of that? Somewhere between 3 and 5, I think, is probably what's likely. You hope to keep all 5, but if not, it probably means out of the portal 2 to 4. Going back to Pringle, that's a guy that would give you more physicality than you have even right now, who's been through those SEC wars. First at Alabama, where he saw what high-level winning was like. Not a great year at South Carolina, so what? He understands this league. He's a veteran guy. He's had question marks in the past, but he's maturing. I understand why Arkansas is at least kicking the tires there. I don't think Calipari contacts and the staff a ton of guys that they're not seriously interested in. They're not looking for their name to be on a list that gets published. They're not looking to, cloak what they're really doing. They don't need the market bump from that. I think it actually works the opposite. If their name's on it, take it seriously, and then you see where it goes. And it's not that they only contact guys that they feel sure they're going to get, because it doesn't work that way in recruiting. As good as Calipari is, he's not going to get everybody he goes after. So you have to cast a net a little bit wider than the numbers you're actually going to bring in. So if I say they're going to probably land on 2 to 4 out of the portal, is what my guess is, then that's what I really think it's probably going to hone in on. Then they're going to be contacting several more players than the 2 or 4 that they're going to end up with. And that is pretty easy to understand. I'm not delivering any earth-shattering news here. But I've heard people asking about, well, what about Tomislav Ivisic, Big Z's twin? That's intriguing. Orlando Antigua, who was part of Calipari's staff, he previously had been with Brian Underwood, went back this past year, his first year back with Illinois, with Calipari coming to Arkansas and bringing back Kenny Payne. They did a good job getting Tomislav. Is there a saloon door swinging both directions? Is there an idea that maybe Illinois is trying to get Big Z to play with his brother, or vice versa? Where does the NBA come in on some of these guys that Arkansas has? Again, I mentioned Brazil. Maybe there's something there. Big Z, I can't rule it out. He's 7'2", can shoot threes, can block shots. He's not strong enough right now to be a consistent factor at the high major level. He's not at 7'2", he's not a strong rebounder. He's got some issues that I think coming back to college is probably his best path, because I think he's a guy, because of his strengths, could actually give himself a chance to be a first-round draft pick in another year. A lot of players, the further they stay in college, it doesn't necessarily help their draft stock. It might actually worsen. He's a guy that I think could actually gain from coming back, but that's my opinion. But either way, Tomislav, is that a guy that's maybe eyeballing the NBA? He's the more physical of the two twins, the more productive, the guy that you could use more. We've seen Arkansas with twin towers under Eric Patrick Musselman just a couple of years ago when you looked at the Mitchell twins. So it's not like it's unprecedented here at Arkansas. So is there something there with Calipari and him? We've heard Owen Freeman, one of the first names we heard going to the portal after Iowa had a coaching change, 6'10" big man, Arkansas out of the Big Ten, obviously, freshman of the year there. But he's a guy that Arkansas could look at, has, apparently there might be some interest there. Another name, when we're talking front line, is Magoon Guaf, who, this guy was the freshman of the year and the defensive player of the year in a really good conference, the Mountain West at San Diego State, a team that got drummed by North Carolina in the first 4 matchup. But he's a 7-footer. He's only 205 pounds, but still he's a 7-footer. He's listed as a forward. They show him as home, out of Texas as far as where he's from. But this guy, 8.5 points, 5.2 rebounds, 2.6 blocks per game, defensive player there in only 25 minutes. shoots nearly 51% from the field. But what's interesting about him is he was 17 of 45 this year from three. So, you're talking about he played a total of 26 games this year, and every time he played, he started. So 26 games for him, but 45 3-point attempts. So nearly on the season, 17 of 45. So 37.8%. You like that percentage? The volume's about 2 attempts from three per game. So he can stretch the floor a little bit and keep a defense honest. So when you run him in two-man game and a screen game, he's a threat if he pops. And then he can pass out of a pop situation if he doesn't have a shot. So anytime you have some versatility on the front line, it just adds more wrinkles to what you can do offensively and use a guy like that. But on social media, Arkansas's name, I saw a tweet or two where Arkansas, I don't know how valid that is, but apparently Arkansas might be in the mix for him, and that's one of the reasons I bring the name up. But he'll be a coveted guy regardless. Same with Owen Freeman. Same with Nick Pringle. If you looked at Nick Pringle's list, it was a who's who of a lot of really good schools. So those are some frontline guys. Another one out there, Indiana, we know that they've had a coaching change, and we'll see about a former five-star. We know, and Calipari recruited him to Kentucky, and we know how that is with Calipari. Mabako, McKenzie, 6'9", 222, solidly built guy, not a monster rebounder. He had kind of an interesting recruiting journey coming out of high school, ended up at IU. But I mentioned Calipari and was on him. But 25 minutes per game. He's played 2 years in Indiana. His statistics in both season, freshman and sophomore, very similar. 12.2 points, 4.6 rebounds, but a 43 and nearly 44% from the field. But he attempts 4.5 threes per game and shoots it at 34.4%. So here's another guy that takes a pretty considerable volume for a frontline guy. Kind of a versatile, you could even call him a stretch four based on that volume with a decent percentage, 32.9%. And he's a guy that you might compare in terms of some of that production, as to what Brazil was doing before he got injured consistently through 8 games, except that he's even been more consistent now, Brazil, and he's a better rebounder than this guy is, and he's a better rim protector than this guy is, and he's percentage-wise a better three-point shooter. I only throw the name out there in terms of a guy that you might make some slight comparisons to if you lost Brazil, but he's another guy who's out there. And I don't know if Arkansas's got interest in that. I mentioned a couple of names one of the last times we were out in the backcourt. Another big guard, since we talked about Bryce Hopkins, and Keyshawn Hall out of Central Florida. Arkansas had recruited him at the previous staff. I've heard that this staff maybe has had some interest in him behind the scenes leading up to the portal season. I don't even know if he's technically in there yet or not. Central Florida's playing in that college basketball crown, whatever that is, and their game scheduled late at the end of this month and early April next week for that thing. I guess in between the final, the Elite Eight, Sweet 16 Elite Eight games this weekend and the Final Four the following weekend. So I don't know much about it, but we'll see if there's any traction there. Obi Agbim out of Wyoming, a 6'3" guard, another volume three-point shooter, efficient guy, pretty good efficiency that I've heard Arkansas might get involved with him going into the portal. So just kind of recapping that, another name on the front line, and I'd meant to talk about him a little bit sooner, and I've got my notes so scattered here because I started most of them yesterday and ended up finishing it today, so I've kind of mixed some of this. Is Somtu Cyril. Now, I've talked about him multiple times, so it's not a new name, and Kentucky had him signed, committed, and delivered to Kentucky before taking the Arkansas job. He ends up at Georgia at 6'11", 260. Kid played at Overtime Elite with Carter Knox. Remember that? They were teammates or played in that same group there. I don't know if they were on the same team there. But 4.8 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks in only 14 minutes per game. So, he's got a decent body of work. He factored into a good Georgia team this year, an NCAA tournament team. And so, he was a guy that was in that two-deep rotation over at Georgia. So he's a guy that I continue to hear there may be some real interest there with Arkansas and a potential for him to get in the portal. Remember, some of these names we've talked about, some of them are in the portal, some of them aren't. And so I'm not 100% sure where Cyril is on portal, but I've just kind of hearing back channel that there might be some mutual stuff going on there with him. Some people saying we're going to get some too. So there may be others out there that are saying more on that. It sounds good from what I hear if it's true, but it's not as strong. I don't have as much direct source on that. It's more third and fourth hand what I'm getting, so I'm a little less enthusiastic about it in terms of where I am in belief. But based on what I'm hearing, if it's true and he goes portal, Arkansas may really be in play there. Jaden Quaintance is one when we talked about Cyril a while back out of Arizona State, another guy, frontline guy that Calipari brought to Kentucky, another one to kind of keep an eye on there. We were talking about volume two guards, because we were talking about Lamar Wilkerson and the comparisons to Nelly and the contrast. And I think a more comparable guy in some ways would be a guy, PJ Haggerty out of Memphis. He's a guy that might be a little more comparable to Nelly in some ways, a lower volume of three-point shooting, not as good as Nelly. They played in the same conference, the American Athletic. Haggerty, an All-American on a really good Memphis team this year, but a guy that averaged 21.7 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 1.8 steals. When you look at those numbers, it's comparable to what Nelly was doing at Florida Atlantic. Now, Nelly was a little bit more efficient shooter, but there are more similarities in terms of kind of checking a lot of boxes, maybe not a high volume three guy. Haggerty, the difference there too is that he can play on the ball. He can run your offense. He's had to do some of that for Memphis with Tyrese Hunter injured. So they're not exactly the same, but some of the statistical data may be a little more comparable to what Nelly was doing. You remember Nelly was averaging 6 rebounds per game, Haggerty at 5.8. Nelly over 3 assists or close to 3 assists at Florida Atlantic, and Haggerty at 3.7. Again, he played more on the ball probably than Nelly did. And then they both have pretty good steals numbers at that level in that league. But he's a guy that, let's see if he's a portal bound guy or not, and where Arkansas would be with that. So there's a lot of names out there. Hopefully some of this was helpful. I think the other piece of intel I want to share now, getting back to how you might finalize this roster, because we talked about 3 high school players. Well, what if it went to 4? If it goes to 4, that's Nate Ament. And we know he visited Arkansas a few weeks ago. We know Calipari's made him a priority. We know Arkansas's in his final 5. I was told his visit exceeded expectations. They had Darius Acuff Jr. in for that. The last time I was on, I had a source that I reported and gave you the information saying that he strongly believes, based on all his contacts, that Arkansas is not in it now. He wasn't affirmed up on who was going to get him, other than he thought Duke probably leads. He also wasn't sure if that was an NIL issue for Arkansas. Only that he didn't think Arkansas was still in it. I shared that. I said this is a good source. He's not been 100% accurate over the years, but he's really good and has a high percentage on it, but it's not 100%. So I threw that out there to say, hey, maybe there's a chance. Maybe because of some of these other factors that he doesn't have a shoe-in for who it is. And, I've always said if Arkansas dips, it'll be because of NIL, and he doesn't even know that much. Not saying that has to be that this isn't working out, but that's on Arkansas's end, that'd probably be the most likely reason Arkansas wouldn't. So for whatever reason, we know that he's making his announcement, McDonald's All-American game date. That's April 1st. He's in that game along with Acuff and Thomas. That's in Brooklyn, New York at the Barclays Center. April 1st is next Tuesday, so 6 days from today. So the new nuggets are, I've got one source giving me some idea about Arkansas's NIL offer. I've heard it. It is really strong. To quote the immortal Will Wade, the North Carolina State Wolfpack coach, it's a strong-ass offer. So I feel good about that. I've got a little update on that. Arkansas's got a really strong NIL offer out there. The sources I'm talking to are some of the same ones, a couple of different ones that I haven't talked to as much in a while, but I really wanted to kind of circle the wagons, and the consensus is still Duke or Louisville. Some I talk to think it's Duke. Some I've talked to say, man, keep Louisville. And I've got one that says don't even completely take her off Tennessee, because Tennessee stormed with whatever Tennessee's doing, they're trying not to lose out either. These final 5 all really want to be the team. So just throwing that in there. But Duke or Louisville's the consensus. And I've got one guy that still thinks that one of these sources still thinks that a team that's desperate, Could a team in this Final Five mix be desperate enough to really go to a place where no one's at right now with NIL? My guess is this kind of player, you're looking at a heavy combination of your collective and your revenue sharing, those pools to piece it together. But if there's a school that's desperate enough to really step out, could that be something that swings this in the final hours? I don't think you could take your eyes off that. I think also with Duke and losing John Lucas to Miami as head coach, we keep talking about the Boozer twins. I don't know if there's anything that could shift that, and I don't know that Ament's not just keeping an eye on that. But he's coming down to the wire on his announcement date, So we'll see if there are any dynamics that shift anything. So I don't have anything new in terms of favoring Arkansas. I haven't given up on it. I'm not convinced that Arkansas is out of it. I don't have any source information that tells me that's a fact. I just have one that says he strongly believes it. I mean, he didn't say it like he doubts Arkansas still, and he goes, Arkansas is not getting him. That's the way he framed it. And again, I've given the caveats with that, and I've said that hasn't put me in the full 100% convinced camp. He may very well be right. It is a good source with a lot of connections. But again, I'm not sold that that's 100% right. And I don't know that Calipari and the staff are sold on that. They very well could already know it, but I don't have information to suggest that they do. And so there's that. And if it's parted ways, then so be it. But we're going to find out soon enough. All right, let's jump into this. I'm 51 minutes in. I'm going to try to keep it under an hour. Arkansas, Texas Tech. We know Arkansas is the Cinderella story. Whoever talks about like that with Sean Calipari in his career being an underdog or a Cinderella, but that's where it is. Arkansas is the lowest remaining seed as a 10 seed. Obviously, Texas Tech's the 3 seed, so it's taking care of its business. It's the highest possible seed out of its part of its pod coming to where it is now for Arkansas to face. 27-8, 15-5 in the Big 12, finished second. They did beat Houston, one of the number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament, and one of the top ranked teams in the country. I think second in the final AP poll. But 15-5 for Texas Tech in a really good Big 12. We know it's a really strong league. And in this series, all time going back to the Southwest Conference, Arkansas dominated most of the Southwest Conference opponents. Texas Tech wasn't one of them. I mean, even Texas, Arkansas has a big plus in the win column versus how many losses, but this is 40 apiece, 40 all. So tied up in the all-time series. Arkansas won the last meeting in the round of 32 in the first Elite Eight team under Eric Patrick Mulsman in the 2021 season. That was the Fab Four out of Arkansas, led by Moses Moody, the school's first one and done. Arkansas Chris Beard was the head coach at Texas Tech on his way out to Texas, but Arkansas wins that game to advance to that Sweet 16, and that's the last time these teams met. So the series is 40 all. Arkansas is playing its 15th Sweet 16 berth, 15th time in school history to reach the Sweet 16. They're seeking, by virtue of a win over Texas Tech, if that happens, seeking the school's 11th all-time berth into an Elite Eight. It's pretty heady stuff. Arkansas's swinging a big bat when it comes to being on that next tier. They're not a blue blood. Calipari says he sees it that way. There are some things that are comparable, but really they're in that next group of teams, I think. I've always felt that way. Arkansas's got a proud program, and they got chances under Calipari, who now has become the most successful first-year coach in Arkansas history. That's saying a lot. I mean, this guy's 66 years old. He's a Naismith Hall of Famer. He's got more wins in the NCAA tournament than anybody at 58 now with this last win over Pitino. We know he beat Bill Self and Rick Pitino, 2 other Naismith Hall of Famers, to get here in this tournament. But 58 wins for him. Now he and Lon Kruger are the only 2 coaches in Division I history to lead 4 different schools to a Sweet 16. And Calipari can put himself in, I think, and buy himself company to be the first coach to lead 4 different programs to an Elite Eight if Arkansas beats Texas Tech. I think one of the biggest storylines coming into this are the obvious things with both teams in terms of quality that they're getting back on the roster. Calipari said earlier in the week on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN that Arkansas is getting a Duke Thero back. Thero's the team's leading scorer, leading rebounder, leader in steals, leader in field goal percentage, leader in free throw attempts, up and down in terms of percentage, but he was Arkansas's leader in just about a ton of different categories and Arkansas's best player when he went out. He hasn't played since February 22nd. He didn't play the final 6 minutes in that big home win over then 15th ranked Missouri. Did I mention the Tigers got bounced out of the NCAA tournament really early, first weekend? Bye-bye. Well, they're gone. But anyway, that was the last time we saw Adu Thero with the team. And he's back. He's going to be back according to Calipari. 12 minutes at the most, 15. You know how Calipari does it. Boogie Flan was going to have a similar role, and he's played a total of 44 minutes in 2 games, 22 minutes per game, 0 turnovers, by the way, for Boogie, playing a different role, playing more of a role player, more of a second unit. Obviously, technically that's what it is, but that's more of his role. And he was Arkansas' second leading scorer, leader in assists, all that stuff. So stats matter, but to what degree do we see Adu Thero in his impact? But I think it helps Arkansas because it's another physical player. If he's fully healthy, it's not just the physicality, but his athleticism. He can create and generate free throw attempts. You just hope he makes them. So you wonder, how rusty is he? Because we've seen some rust with Boogie Flan in terms of his shooting. But I think in terms of taking care of the basketball, he's the exact player that he was when he left. I mean, in this tournament, in those 44 minutes and his opportunities on the ball and setting guys up, I think he's got 5 or 6 assists, but again, 0 turnovers. And he's got, I think, a total of 5 steals in these 2 games as well. And that's something he's good at, is getting that basketball. We know Thero can do it as well. But on the other side, Texas Tech, one of their top, the Red Raiders' 3rd leading scorer on the season, hasn't played the last 3 games. Excuse me, he went out with an upper body injury, a torso injury in the Big 12 tournament. Chance McMillan. And you talk about 3-point shooting. I mean, that's what this guy is. This is a really good 3-point shooting team. It's a really good free throw shooting team. And he's a big part of that, but he's missed the last 3 games. It didn't keep Texas Tech from winning and advancing in the NCAA tournament. And it sounds like, he's traveled with the team. He's in San Francisco. And all accounts are that he's going to be available to play, but you wonder about his effectiveness. How many minutes can he play? What does he bring to the table? But let me tell you what he brings to the table if he's who he is prior to injury, because we know what Adu Thero is. I mentioned that Texas Tech finished 15-5 for second place in the Big 12. I'm going to run through the top player that Arkansas's got to focus on shortly, and the team's second leading scorer and kind of jack of all trades player, versatile guy. But just because I'm talking McMillan right now, a 6'3" senior, he's been around the block, 14.2 points per game. This season, 69 of 159 from 3, shooting 43.4% from 3. And he also happens to be an 88.2% free throw shooter. So here's a guy you don't want to foul. Certainly don't want to foul him shooting a 3, and you don't want him getting threes off. You don't want him getting clean looks. You want to take him out if you can and keep him from taking shots. And when I say take him out, I don't mean to try to re-injure him. I mean to cover him up and make sure that you account for him. Arkansas sometimes struggles with identifying and tagging those 3-point shooters. We saw that with Zeke Mayo in the first round against Kansas. Arkansas lost him a few times. So if this guy's healthy and ready to come back and be who he is, that's something to keep an eye on. This is not St. John's. It is a really good team. St. John's was too, but St. John's can't really stretch the floor. And for whatever reason, that team had good assist numbers and not horrible turnover numbers, but they did not make Arkansas work defensively. You saw very few 2-man setup game where you're using the pass to work guys open and get easier shots for St. John's. And I didn't see any ball fakes from anybody. No head fakes on the perimeter to drive, no ball fakes once you got close to the basket. And that is one of Arkansas's weaknesses. It's a strong shot blocking team, and Arkansas has a tendency to leave their feet, the Razorbacks do, on ball fakes. And we've seen Arkansas struggle with that. So Texas Tech is a very efficient offense, and they do those kinds of things that we didn't see St. John's do. It's a harder team. They're the 5th rated. St. John's was number 1 in defensive efficiency coming into that game. Arkansas was a better defensive team and a top 20 team defensive efficiency, according to Ken Palm. So it was no slouch there. Offensively, Texas Tech is ranked 5th nationally, and I just mentioned it, but it starts, and let's go back to individual players, and we'll get back to the team dynamics, but it really starts with T.J. Toppin, the 6'9" sophomore transfer from New Mexico, one of the big portal names a year ago, but 18.1 points per game, over 9 rebounds per game, and he blocks 1.5 shots per game. So he gives Texas Tech a little bit of everything. Rim protection, he can step out and shoot threes. He's 56.2% shooting from the field, so he's very efficient getting to the basket, but 31.4% from three, and shoots 70% from the free throw line. So Toppin does a lot of really good things for that Texas Tech team. Just a really good player. And if I'm not mistaken, was he the Big 12 Player of the Year? I didn't write that down, but I think he might have been. He might have been someone's Big 12 Player of the Year. But that's where it starts, is with TJ Toppin. And then Darion Williams, 6'6" junior. Darion Williams, 14.7 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.2 steals. He is a jack of all trades. He can beat you. I mean, he can get you a double-double. He can score. He can stretch the floor a little bit, get into his slash game. He's tough in transition. He'll rebound. He's a tough guy. And then I mentioned Chance McMillan's numbers. Now they've got a freshman guard in that backcourt that averages, I think, 10.5 points per game. They've got good depth. But this is as good a team as Arkansas has faced this season, or up there. They're in that upper echelon of teams in the SEC and comparable. St. John's, again, they're not comparable style-wise. But this team, I think, presents more problems offensively because they can stretch the floor. I mean, this is an elite three-point shooting team. We mentioned Chance McMillan, but it's a team that makes 10.1 threes per game, shooting at 37.1%. So those are elite numbers. You look at the volume of makes. Anytime you look at percentage, you got to look at the volume. So it's all there. 76.1% from the free throw line. That's elite. That's really good. Anything over 75%, you don't want to foul this team. Now, this team doesn't get there in the same volume that Arkansas does, but it gets there enough. And so the mistakes you can make on this team is letting them get off from three, and then if you send them to the foul line and foul too much, they're going to make you pay for that. The other thing that they're really good at is their assist to turnover. Nearly 17 assists per game, 16.7, just under 10 turnovers per game, 9.7. As a team, that is a really good ratio. And they don't foul a lot. So that's where Arkansas wants to get into the drive of the game, wants to get to the free throw line. Texas Tech, 37th rated defense efficiency. That's pretty solid, but they don't foul a lot. So one of Arkansas' strengths knocks heads with one of the strengths of Texas Tech, which is not fouling a lot. So, if you look at this team, this is a much better offensive team when you look at it from just KenPom, and there's not a gulf of distance between the two teams when you look at it from a defensive standpoint. But Arkansas's offense is getting better in certain ways because I think more players are understanding the strengths of their games and buying into roles more and more. And we've seen it. Arkansas's won 7 out of 9 games coming into this one, going back to the end of the regular season, and beat several tournament teams. And of course, the St. John's wins technically with 5th-ranked team in the country, a 2 seed, is the best win of the season. Now you want to go get another one of those high-caliber wins. 7 SEC teams in the Sweet 16, that's an all-time record in the NCAA tournament. If you're Arkansas and you're able to beat Texas Tech, you're probably, I think Florida's still a tough game against UConn, but 2-time defending national champs that had won 13 straight tournament games. That's going to be hard to beat. And Florida did that in a tight game. Maryland's no slouch out of the Big Ten, and that's been a good conference in this tournament. But I expect Florida to move on. And if Arkansas moves on, I don't think there's a team in this field that Arkansas can't match up with and stay close and give itself a chance to win, including Florida. So there's that. And so Arkansas has got a chance to make history. Calipari's got a chance to add to what's already a glorious resume. This is the time of year. I feel less confident about this matchup with Texas Tech than I did against St. John's. The only feather here, I think, for Arkansas is that the Razorbacks have proven that no matter what the point spread differential is, and they're the underdog, no matter what the strengths of the other team are, Arkansas's actually stood up in this run of wins and been the better team in a lot of categories coming into it. You didn't think they necessarily would be. And I go back to it. There's not a team in the country that outmatches Arkansas in terms of overall size, length, athleticism, and talent. Maybe in skill, maybe in shooting skill, and a few pockets of things, but overall, no. And so I think this is another tight game. I think this goes to the wire. And I think if Arkansas closes the game like it did both against Kansas and St. John's, and that was by limiting the self-inflicted wounds, the implosion stretches, by limiting that, they've shown a better resiliency DNA strand here. I think Arkansas will win this game if they're able to do that. I really do. I think they'll win it. And so that's so but it's based on those ifs. They got to do those things. If they don't do those things, I think Texas Tech's probably too good and can punish you, because what happens at the end of games? The team that can shoot free throws. Well, Texas Tech does that at a really high clip. Sometimes you lose a guy. You're trying to cover both 3-point and paint, and this team can make you pay if you miss a beat on that perimeter. So those kind of things, I think Arkansas's got to be on point if it's a close game, which I expect coming down the stretch. You say, well, isn't that obvious? Well, for Arkansas, it hasn't been. They're Jekyll and Hyde at times. They're getting better. They proved it against St. John's. They even proved it at the end of Kansas. Time to do that again in another close game. And I think if it happens, I think Arkansas and Calipari find a way to move on to the Elite Eight, and then it's probably Florida. All right, that's it. I went well over an hour, pushing an hour and 6 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. I hope it was useful today. Until next time, if something breaks between now and tomorrow, it's a late tip. I'm doing a post game. You know that. Until then, take care. Appreciate you. See you then.